Hello and welcome back to the high-tech low-life century. That's my channel on YouTube, and my name is David, also known as Rivethead 1982. And I'd like to continue on with my discussion about cyberpunk science fiction. And the main topic I'm going to pick for this video here is the whole subject of living spaces and the lack of any type of traditional family setup. Because in a lot of these stories, there isn't really any traditional families that I can see. The closest that I could find in some of the stories that I looked at would be the character YT, also known as Yours Truly in the novel Snow Crash by Neil Stephenson. Now her setup is about as traditional as it gets, as far as what I've seen, and what we have here with YT is this: she's a skateboard courier, and she's got a whole bunch of gadgets and machines to help her, move fast throughout Los Angeles and different parts of the metropolitan area. And she's got her courier job, but in some parts of the novel, depending on where she is in the city, she lives with her mom. And then in other parts of the story, she's back with her boyfriend, and she goes back and forth between her mom and her boyfriend. And her setup is very interesting. But when you look at stories like, the rest of the characters, if you look at the rest of the characters of Snow Crash, and then you also take a look at the characters of Neuromancer, Akira, Ghost in the Shell, and even Blade Runner, and a bunch of other stories, you'll find that the traditional set of a family just isn't there, and the living spaces are either icky or kind of odd or about as basic as it can get. But since we're talking about YT and Snow Crash, I should also talk about the character Hero, or otherwise known as Hero Protagonist, who's known throughout the story as a hacker for hire and the greatest swordsman left in the world. And this is a guy who's good at sword skills and some different forms of martial arts, but he's also one of the best hackers that was portrayed in the story. And the hacking job is his more of his specialty job, but his main odd job that he uses also to financially survive would be that odd pizza delivery job that he has throughout the beginning of the story. He eventually loses it, but that's his other job. And it seems that he's one of many characters that has to work a number of jobs to stay financially afloat. And he has a roommate, and his roommate is some underground rock star who has that job, but then also does these various icky odd jobs throughout different parts of the story, even though what he does in his private life is vaguely mentioned. This rock star, manages to get by, but both he and Hero combine their portions of the rent and pay the rent, and they barely have enough to survive as it is. And the space that they live in the story is this crappy storage garage that they retrofitted into a living space. But it's a storage garage that is surrounded by other storage garages because it's in a storage garage center. And they're able to just open up the garage door, and there's a place for a bed, maybe a cot, and just a few places. Hero's little laptop that he uses to go into the metaverse, and it's just a very icky setup, and they all have to share showers with other people in this little tiny shower facility in the storage center, and it's a pretty bleak setup. And the other types of forms of lack of family would be especially found in both the manga and the movie adaptation of the manga, which is known as Akira. Whether you look at Akira the manga or Akira the animated film, what you'll see is these young biker guys and a few other characters. And a lot of these young characters are either living in dorms, or they're living in hotel rooms, or they're just living all combined in some crappy apartment. But there's no mention of any family members. I mean, there was a scene in which the biker gang was trying to create some type of a fabricated story for the cops, so that way they don't, so that way they can avoid punishment. And there was, I mean, the policeman mentioned, so you guys were looking for your mom, and that's why you were bike riding, or you were trying to help out your sick mom, and trying to make a visit to her, and blah blah blah. And I forgot exactly what he said, but it was the typical, sick parent story that the characters used. But there's really no indication of family members within this biker gang in Akira. Snow Crash, we just have the main character Case, and he's got a girlfriend who sold him down the river, but other than that, there's no indication of any mom or dad or sisters or brothers or any tight family setup. Or he doesn't really have friends either. And Molly, you don't know what the character. We don't know that much about the character Molly and her history. We just know that she's street samurai in the story Neuromancer. And Case is also just the character in Neuromancer who, we're just trying to find out. Okay, we know he's been a hacker, but where's his family? And Blade Runner has an interesting side because you have Deckard, and I'm only going, and when I'm talking about this, I'm only going by the director's cut and the final cut, the versions that have the narration. What we have in those stories is a setup where you have a prominent Blade Runner detective, just this android cop, and he lives in a very small, crammed-in apartment complex. And a lot of the other characters, particularly Leon and Zora, they are all crammed into a small, crummy hotel room. And these are two people that have pretty okay jobs. I mean, Leon is a loader. He's also he just works these jobs. And then Zora, as she's in hiding, she works as a stripper, one of the top strippers of Taffany Lewis's place. And you think with all that money they'd have a reasonable living space, but they don't. They have just some small crammed in hotel room. And then you have J.F. Sebastian, one of the top designers of the Tyrell Corporation. And it seems that he is in a big apartment room, but it's the only functional room in this whole apartment building. It leaks, it just looks crummy. A lot of space, but it's just a very crummy, foreboding setup. And so foreboding that I think the addition of creepy toys makes it a little bit more bearable. Because if he didn't have the toys, I think it would just look like the home of somebody who's shut in. And it's just, I think the toys, as creepy as they are, they make it a little bit better looking. Because if it was just a whole bunch of Victorian furniture all trashed around, I think it'd be a pretty, even more morbid place. So we have those situations in Blade Runner, and then I just talked about Neuromancer, and I talked about Akira. Also, one more thing I like to add is the whole setup of Ghost in the Shell. Ghost in the Shell, you have all these characters, a lot of them live alone, a lot of them live in just some average apartment, considering the type of big job that they've got. You'd think that they would afford better places, but the Major, she's in just some regular apartment room. The only character, there's only one character, and it's the cop that doesn't have that many modifications, but the more human cop, I forget his name, but that character, he's the one with the long hair and Ghost in the Shell series, and teams up with the Major and Bato quite a bit. And he's the only one that has an average family. He has a wife and a child, and he's the only one. Everybody else is just either lives alone or they're shacked up with some friends. And even in Ghost in the Shell, the whole idea, the whole look of traditional families has almost been obliterated. There's a few families that they show here and there if you look at the Standalone Complex series, but I mean, the traditional setup of family's gone. And the living spaces are just becoming more and more questionable.